Hello, welcome to the semi-final episode of the 2020 KeSpa Cup reviews. I'm LinkedIn and thank you for coming by. Today's 6th day of games, the teams NS, KT, Damwon and Hanhwa Live are facing each other in the best of 5. If you like the content you see, consider liking and subscribing, but now getting right into the first series between Damwon and Hanhwa Live. Starting in the first game, we see Jace, Olaf, Syndra, Jhin, Leona facing off Aatrox, Nidalee, Orianna, Twitch and Alistar. Starting in the top lane as always, Jace, well, he goes boop boop on Aatrox's head and should win the lane in every case. Olaf versus Nidalee, also a matchup we have seen through the years, so focusing more on the 2v2. The 2v2 in top lane is in Damwon's favor, mainly because of the Jace and the lead he brings with him. Mid lane, also Syndra can fight with committing less into this, and the CC is also of great use here. Talking more about the mid lane, we have Orianna and Syndra farming with their balls and orbs. Still very interesting here, as we get to see Chovy versus Showmaker, the best and the third best mid lane in the world. Very exciting nonetheless. Talking about the bot lane, Jhin Leona facing off Twitch Alistar. Jhin, as often, he's a good laner, especially in comparison to weak laners like Twitch, who later offers more DPS and obviously can try to assassinate the Damwon players with his invisibility. But Twitch, a very unusual champion to see, and there are reasons for that. In the support position, nothing new again in this department here. With the immobile mid laners, both are good roam targets for them, but overall Leona and Alistar are the standard norm supports at the moment. We already talked quite a lot about them, so not going into more detail. Going over the bans, we see nothing really standing out. In the first rotation we have most of the overpowered and very strong picks. In the second rotation we see support bans and AD carry bans. Again, nothing major, nothing substantial. In the early game, Damwon Gaming has a small favor here and they can snowball it, as Hanhwa Live has also very little wave clear besides Orianna, so taking turrets is kinda easier than usual. So in these two lanes where Orianna isn't, Damwon Gaming can push quite good. If they group up, Hanhwa Live has a very difficult job as well to play dodgeball with the axes, orbs, shock blasts and more abilities that gets thrown their way. Also, if they get hit, most of the abilities slow, so Jhin and Leona can easily lock that guy down and, well, yeah, hit them up some more. The Twitch on the other side can try to look for picks, but as I said, Damwon wants to group up even more than normal comms would like to do. And another thing to look out for them would be the Alistar-Orianna combo, but Alistar will die very fast if he tries to get too close through a more linear path, and, well, flanks are always an X factor, so it's very hard to evaluate how easy it is to get flanks. But combine that with the Aatrox, who also wants to look for flanks, and Damwon Gaming knowing that flanks are an obvious weakness to poke and siege comps, they probably predict this and be more conscious and more careful about the way they position themselves and what, so that they don't get flanked. In the end, Damwon Gaming was able to achieve the first victory here, and Hanhwa Live, besides Chovy with its Orianna, was, well, useless pretty fast, and then it was mostly a chicken hunt with Damwon throwing their abilities at Hanhwa Live. In game number 2, we see no side switch, but changing a few players on Hanhwa Live sides. We see Morgan for Dudu and Cat for Johan. Then in the game, Aatrox, Olaf, Syndra, Jhin, Alistar. A bit familiar, right? And then Kennen, Lilia, Yone, Misfortune and Leona. In the top lane, Aatrox and Kennen, well, that matchup goes there and there. Kennen obviously has the range advantage and can bully him, but in some cases, if the Aatrox player is very skilled, he's actually able to land the Qs on Kennen, and then Kennen is quite squishy. Aatrox can hurt him quite a bit. In general though, Kennen has a good CS lead here. Has to watch out though for the Olaf and Aatrox combination. Olaf and Lilia we have in the jungle, both farm quite fast. Olaf as usual wins the 1v1 here. Lilia on the other side does scale better though. The 2v2 Olaf and Syndra, Lilia and Yone do look quite nice here. Syndra obviously has the bit more reliable CC than the other side, but Lilia and Yone are more mobile. In the mid lane again, Syndra, Yone can push here with his mana less push till about level 9 or Lost Chapter. If you're interested, these timers are around the 11th minute for level 9, and depending on farm, kills and so on, For Lost Chapter Rush, it's like around 9 minutes. Then later in potential side lanes and skirmishes, Yon obviously with his high mobility can beat Syndra quite handily. In the bot lane, Jhin versus Misfortune and Alistar Leona. Well, we had all of this the whole tournament long, so yeah. Remember, Jhin lanes quite good, MF does lane a bit better. Alistar Leona, yeah, no point mentioning that again. Jhin offers the more follow-up for his team with his slows, so he's more of a supportive AD carry in that department, or a more setup AD carry. Misfortune obviously with her ult and her more aggressive early spiking build wants to fight more and is more focused on the DPS and damage overall. In the bans we see literally the same bans again. The only difference would be the second round bans for Damwon, where we see a bit more tank bans for the Aatrox, but other than that there's no change here. In the early game, yeah, it should be around even, but for Damwon their champs aren't as ultimate dependent, so they can fight a bit earlier. But once the 5v5 comes around with the many AoE abilities and now more mobile champions, they can fight more freely. As Damwon also doesn't have the same amount of poke and range deterrence, still tons of burst damage paired with pick potential, but not as trigger happy as before. Hanhwa Life can engage more freely this time. Damwon Gaming's frontline, which they got instead of the poke of last game, is not as reliable in terms of protection for their carries. In the late game stages, these bruisers from Damwon's side also fall off very strongly, so after the mid game come the 30-minute mark, they will be past their expiration date, while many of Hanhwa Life's champions scale up to 6 items. In the end, Hanhwa Life was able to get the win. Also, their team synergy of this specific iteration looked very solid, and the draft was more in their favor overall. Coming to game number 3, again no side switch. We see Gragas, Graves, Syndra, Senna, Maokai versus Ornn, Lilia, Jace, Misfortune and Galio. In the top lane, yeah, the tank on tank matchup. Both have nice targets for the ultimates in the late game team fights, as both teams have many immobile carries. In the lane, Ornn, as always, don't underestimate him, he's very powerful. So in the jungle, Graves versus Lilia, we hadn't this one in a while, but well, nothing really changed drastically from Worlds. Graves still beats her 1v1 and early on. Even though her farming is a bit faster than his, he is more impactful faster into the game. And overall, Graves is a very powerful champion, overall the strongest jungler in the game at the moment. With the Gragas and Syndra, he also has the setup from his solo lanes and the AP-AD damage mix, which Lilia only has with Jace really, and there is still no setup for both of them. Talking about Syndra and Jace a bit, again Syndra working very nice with Graves in the jungle 2vs2. Jace on the other side is more safe here than the Orianna because he has longer range, but he has to be a bit more careful as he is also more squishier as he doesn't have the shield Orianna has. He himself can do quite well against Syndra, but Syndra can't shove him really easily as her wave clear is way better than his, so she can kinda avoid the matchup. In the bot lane, Senna Maokai versus MF Galio. Senna Maokai, obviously no pressure lane, does scale very nicely, having more heals and the very strong tank in the tree against the, well, looking over it, more or less full AD comp of Hanhwa Life. MF Galio, obviously a very strong and aggressive lane, but against the Senna Maokai, well, they can push, but nothing really more. Take a couple of plates, but Senna and Maokai are very safe. Under the turrets, they can CS quite okay, and with the added sustain of Senna, Maokai is even more fine here. Looking at bans, so Damwon banning Yon instead of Akali now, after Chovy's quite strong performance in game number 2. On the other side, we see the Akali ban for themselves, leaving Graves open, which is then eventually picked by Canyon. In the game, Hanhwa Life, having nearly only 80 damage, have a problem against the 2 tanks with the Senna sustain, but Damwon Gaming also doesn't have that much damage. Even though Syndra and Graves do quite a lot, they lack real DPS to deal with the Hanhwa Life sides of tanks. Both teams also have decent long range abilities to hit each other with, combined with some engage, whereas Damwon has the better one in my opinion. Draft wise, I have to say this game is quite even, and it mostly depends on execution and player skills. skill shots being landed or evaded on the important squishy targets, objective control, with objective control the tempo advantage, getting vision leads, and then at the end being the first one to set objective to secure the important choke points and then use them correctly with the tons of AoE abilities. I'm talking here Maokai ultimates, Graves ultimates, Syndra E combinations, even a Gragas barrel, and on the other side obviously Jace, Misfortune and Ornn have all similar strong abilities for set choke points. They are really similar here, while you could imagine that the scaling on one team might be better, but Senna and Ornn both very strong late game champions. And in the game we saw a very close one. Damwon was mostly winning due to their skills, and Canyon was also able to get way too ahead on Cat and in the end secured 3 Infernals and the Soul, giving their team a very great late game lead, which, well, if both teams are so very similar, can't be really overcome for Hanhwa Life, meaning Damwon Gaming was able to secure their second win, even though players like Chovy really made them work. In game number 4, again we see no side switch, but Arthur starts in the jungle over Cat, so another third jungle switch, having seen now all 3 of Hanhwa Life's junglers. We see in the game Akali, Kha'Zix, Syndra, Misfortune and Maokai for Damwon, and for Hanhwa Life we see Aatrox, Olaf, Zoe, Kog'Maw and Lulu. In the top lane, well, yeah, leaving Akali open, well, she's not played in the mid lane as Showmaker wants to keep being a Syndra one-trick pony. Well, anyway, in the top 1v1 early, Aatrox has a small lead in lane, but Akali with her sustain can be quite fine and wait for level 6. With set level 6 she can take over the lane as her burst is stronger than Aatrox can sustain with his ultimate, for example. In the jungle, Ka versus Olaf, well, Olaf does Olaf things, but Kha'Zix with the new Duskblade works very well in any type of skirmish or team fight. There's obviously a very huge chance for reset kills on his part. Also looking at the enemy side, for him there are many squishy targets. Syndra and Zoe in the mid lane, well, after a while Syndra has more and easier wave clear, but even then due to Zoe's range, Zoe can still be quite of a nuisance for her. For both, it is really easy to land skill shots on each other. Syndra knows where Zoe is due to the ult destination being well shown, and Syndra under her turret in the early game can't really evade the bubble all that well. In the bot lane, MF Maokai versus Kog'Maw Lulu. Well, MF, she is a good laner, remember, and Kog'Maw is a scaler, but well, melee versus range support and the strong synergy Kog'Maw Lulu have is making a huge difference here. Also, Kog'Maw's W is quite a headache of a spell. Lulu later obviously is a juicy target for the assassin and overall burst of Damwon Gaming, but on the other side, her wild growth can also protect her friends from said burst. In the ban phase, we see more or less the same bans coming through for Damwon, again banning the Yone, now taking away the Alistar in the second half. On the other side, we see adaptation and banning the Graves again after what Canyon did, but now, as I said at the very start, we see the Akali left open. In the game, Damwon has the early game lead due to their top side and MF's increased power on the first item in comparison to Kog'Maw. This leads to Damwon Gaming to dominate the early and mid stage of the game. Hanhwa Life's comp additionally is quite a mess. Their bot side wants to scale and Kog'Maw needs to be protected. The Zoe works okay with that idea, offering not much protection but scales quite okay. Wave clear from range is also one she offers for the team, but the top half are quite anti-scaling champions, so they fall off late game. The team wants to do different things here. In fights, Kog'Maw wants to kite back, Zoe about the same, staying far away from the fight, just poking in and out of it with her ultimate and some battle stars, while Olaf and Aatrox just want to charge into the team, leaving their carries unprotected, especially against the strong, very strong double assassin lineup of Damwon Gaming in the Kha'Zix and the Akali. And we have to say, Akali, one of the strongest champion of this patch at the moment, so having no protection for Kog'Maw besides a Lulu who can be one-shot by the Akali herself or, well, nearly everyone of Damwon Gaming's team is, yeah, creating quite a disturbance in Hanhwa Life's game plan, and in the end it was quite the slaughter. As expected, the double assassins were popping off and having a feast on Hanhwa Life, resulting in Damwon Gaming's win. One has to say for Hanhwa Life though, they were quite a fresh and new team in terms of their lineup. Obviously player like Chovy and Deft can do a lot, but not always on their own, so the other members who are quite young are important for it, and this was a good experience for them. Vista built good synergy in bot lane, while the jungle and top are still questionable due to them being swapped out a bit. Morgan and Dudu, for example, were doing okay in some scenarios, and the junglers each had their own moments, but it's hard to compare that with Damwon Gaming, who are, well, the world champions, who additionally also just changed one member in their entire roster. Before coming to the next series, if you have enjoyed it so far, please leave a like, comment, or maybe subscribe if you like the content overall. It really makes my day, and yeah, it really helps out a lot as well, so I would be really thankful if you did. Anyway, continuing, coming to another series, KT versus NongShim. So yeah, in game number 1 we see Renekton, Talia, Victor, Kai'Sa, Alistar facing off Aatrox, Nidalee, Orianna, Aphelios and Leona. In the top lane we had this matchup quite a lot, so yeah, we remember Renekton wins this quite handily. In the jungle, for the early game I favor Nidalee in this one, but then looking at the 2v2s, Talia obviously has the stronger one in either top or mid. She isn't farming as fast though, still scaling better than Nidalee, especially with the current builds that are being elected. In the mid lane, Victor versus Orianna. Victor, not the most usual mid laner at the moment, but similar to other control mages, he's just farming. With the item changes, he comes online a bit faster than before, and he's also quite similar to Orianna in him being a burst mage. Victor has problems early on though, as his wave clear is not as strong as Orianna's, and he needs more than just the standard lost chapter. He needs level 9, so the 5 points in his death rate, so he has to wait till the 11th minute or so, while being mostly pushed in. In the bot lane, Kai'Sa, Alistar versus Aphelios, Leona. Aphelios has the lane pressure, and he and Leona may blow up Kai'Sa if they get to her, but then again, Alistar is quite decent to defend his AD carry, so the CS lead should just be about a couple in the end, as Aphelios also doesn't want to overforce as a scaling carry himself. There is no real need for it. And yeah, in the support lineup, I already mentioned it, it's the standard support matchup of this patch, so yeah. In the ban phase, we see mostly standard bans for both teams in the first half, then KT is targeting Peanut's jungle pool a bit here. In the game, KT's lead in the top lane can be used to get multiple heralds to try to quicken up the tempo, getting turrets fast and early to keep their Renekton relevant, and if they do that, well, Renekton will continue to win over the Aatrox and stay relevant damage wise. Scaling in the mid lane and bot lane is about even, and well, the junglers, I said Talia does more late game as she's a control mage and was played in the mid lane quite a while before. NS has the slightly better engage due to Orianna and Leona having more range than the Alistar, but engaging into Victor, Alistar and Talia isn't none that easy. Overall, the teams are quite similar, and KT has the small edge for me because of the stronger top lane 2v2 setup, which can be snowballed, but if that isn't enough or should not work out, it's everyone's game. In the game, well, we nearly saw exactly that. KT had the game won due to their top lane 2v2, but fumbled into important late game team fights twice, losing the Ocean Soul, which makes Rich stay alive, even though KT had 3 anti-healing items, and then the follow-up Elder with the Baron buff right after. Both comps being quite similar. We saw how powerful KT was with their small gold lead. NongShim having the great stat lead through the buffs was way too much for them, so they were able to kinda steal the first win here. Again, it was more in KT's control, so it was more like KT lost this game than NongShim winning it. In game number 2, we again have no side switch, so getting right into it, on Hecarim, Victor, Kai'Sa, Alistar, facing again Aatrox, Olaf, Sylas, Ezreal and Leona. Starting as always in the top lane, Rich, Aatrox, so yeah, he's quite known for it. But on, well, he's quite good as well. Still, Aatrox has to watch out for him. The level 6 Ornn combo can be quite good, but Aatrox is still fine into the Ornn in nearly FKs here. Hecarim versus Olaf. Hecarim has the better ganks, I have to say. His targets are also, well, better. He's not farming as fast as the Olaf, but he is outscaling him though. Also again, remember Hecarim can do a few more things than other junglers can. In the mid lane, Victor versus Sylas. Here, Victor now is the bully till Sylas gets a few items and, well, can steal good ultimates and so on. Range versus melee matchup, so the CS lead can be quite good for the Victor here. In the bot lane, Kai'Sa, Alistar versus Ezreal, Leona. Kai'Sa having the early push again. Ezreal, with or without tier, will have little lane control till a while, but then, yeah, as always, he can easily bully the Kai'Sa in the mid game game, getting the lead right back to himself. Support matchup, yeah, Alistair Leona, well, yeah. In the ban phase, standard bans in the first half, NS is still banning Yone. The Orianna ban, well, it's a pick that UCL doesn't really play that often, so banning it is no problem for him. In the last game we also saw that she was making it quite difficult for Victor, so yeah. Good adaptation in this case. NongShim has the early and mid game lead for me, and not only a small one, as KT is very scaling focused overall, which simply means come the 30th minute or either KT getting a good lead, this game is quite over unless, well, Souls or Elder steal shenanigans. Till said late game, it's NongShim's game though, Aatrox running at Victor and friends with Olaf by his side, Silas having the best ult to steal in the game, with another very strong great ultimates here. Also overall the design of their comp is more focused around skirmishing, which is the preferred way to play. In the mid game, many engage options and a diverse damage share, just making their comp overall a bunch of problems for KT all at once. Due to this, NS was able to steamroll the game here in the mid game, getting a bunch of kills. KT was trying to hold strong in team fights, but well, even if they got good choke points, their champions, right, look at them, Victor, Ornn, Hecarim, they really want to love in these kinds of jungle corridors, but having no damage and no items leaves them a bit to be desired, not being able to kill the bruisers of the other side, resulting in their endgame failure. So game number 3, again we have no side selection switch, but KT switches up quite a lot, swapping nearly everyone. Castle for Doran in the top lane, Vikla for UCL in mid, Noah for hybrid, and Rebel for Zeus in the bot lane. In the pick ban we also got many changes in comparison to the last games. Pantheon versus Volibear in the top lane, Grace versus Talia in the mid lane, Galio versus Zoe, Aphelios Thresh versus Kaiser Alistair in the bot lane. So Pantheon, well, yeah, he's quite good. This is the first time that he passes the ban stage. Still, Volibear is quite a competent pick into most melees, and with his tankiness, he's not easy to be bullied or doven. In the jungle, well, it's a common matchup. Graves also, there's a reason why he's banned so often, and pairing up with the Galio and the Pantheon, he can be quite a dangerous foe that can invade Talia's jungle quite blindly. The mid lane had this one in the past, but not too often, so a short revisit. Galio mainly looking for roams 24/7, especially with his ult onto the Graves, or in combination with Pantheon ult, while being pushed in by Zoe into his turret, not being harassed too much though due to his high magic resistance. In the bot lane we had the exact one in game 1, but the support matchup is way more aggressive for KT, giving them a larger lead than what we saw before, while the Thresh, also with his lantern, is more useful here in this case than he usually is. Still, he offers less in late game teamfights than the Cow does. In the ban phase we see Olaf and Aatrox bans against Peanut and Rich respectively, and then also Yone, because Yone works really well with Talia. Talia was already picked, as you see on screen. As such, banning the Yone, so this strong combination isn't possible. On the other side, well, the power pick bans on the red side, still leaving Graves open in the second half of bans, so as you see as well on screen, the Graves was picked quite late. Overall, Pantheon and Graves come through, and somehow, well, KT gets both of them, which, yeah, shouldn't really happen, as both are very strong and contested picks. In the game, well, having Graves and Pantheon with the support of Galio, KT has not only good roaming tools, the skirmishing and mid-game power is also very strong. In the later stages though, NS is outscaling them this time, so yeah, KT, besides having this full rookie squad of very young players, they have another little issue here, which is that they are mostly full AD. From Beard to Cow, everyone can stack armor on the other side, cause the scaling to go in their favor even earlier. In this case, KT was suffering from some issues that are not really related to their picks. The team synergy being off at some points, making some bit more silly macro mistakes, and then after the early game where they were looking for plays, they became passive quite fast in the mid and late game. Combine that with the set mistakes in the earlier stages, and also, well, some individual mechanics being not as high as they could be, or as high as they are on other teams like Damwon for example. They weren't able to get ahead as fast and as much as they should, but remember again, this is KT's B team after switching out all players. and some of them aren't even 18 years old, so they still have a lot of time to improve upon their individual and team play mistakes, which obviously means that NongShim was able to get the win here, completing the series 3-0. So in the upcoming finals next week we have NongShim versus Damwon. Not really what we expected at the start of the tournament. Certainly NS has exceeded our expectations here. So that's it. Thank you for watching. In the playlist you can find the previous KeSpaCup review episodes, or maybe you're interested in other off-season content. That as well you can find in the playlist, in the description below, or overall on my channel. Anyway, hope you had a good time. If you did, please leave a like or comment. Again, it really helps out quite a lot and would really make my day. That's it for now though. Please stay safe. Have some great days. Till next time. Bye.